Anurakta, firmly attached. Sahasa, all of a sudden. Eva, certainly. Dhira, self-controlled. Vyapohya, leaving aside. Deha, gross body and subtle mind. Adishu, relating to. Sangam, attachment. Udam, taken to. Vrajanti, go away. Tat, that. Paramahamsyam, the highest stage of perfection. Antyam, and beyond that. Yes, men. In which ahimsa, non-violence, upashama, renunciation, swadharma, consequential occupation. Translation: self-controlled persons who are attached to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna can all of a sudden give up the world of material attachment, including the gross body and the subtle mind, and go away to attain the highest perfection of the renounced order of life, by which non-violence and renunciation are consequential. Purport: only the self-controlled can gradually be attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Self-controlled means not indulging in sense enjoyment more than is necessary, and those who are not self-controlled are given over to sense enjoyment. Drive. Philosophical speculation is a subtle sense enjoyment of the mind. Sense enjoyment leads one to the path of darkness. Those who are self-controlled can make progress on the path of liberation from the conditional life of material existence. The Vedas therefore enjoin that one should not go to the path of darkness, but should make a progressive march towards the path of life or liberation. Self-control is actually achieved not by artificially stopping the senses from material enjoyment, but by becoming factually attached to the Supreme Lord by engaging one's unalloyed senses in the transcendental service of the Lord. The senses cannot be forcibly curved, but they can be given proper engagement. Purified senses, therefore, are always engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. This perfectional stage of sense engagement is called Bhakti Yoga. So those who are attached to the means of Bhakti Yoga are factually self-controlled and can all of a sudden give up their homely or bodily attachment for the service of the Lord. This is called the Paramahamsa stage. Hamsas, or swans, accept only milk out of a mixture of milk and water. Similarly, those who accept the service of the Lord instead of Maya's service are called the Paramahamsas. They are naturally qualified with all the good attributes such as pridelessness, freedom from vanity, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, respectability, worship, devotion, and sincerity. All these godly qualities exist in the devotee of the Lord spontaneously. Such Paramahamsas who are completely given up to the service of the Lord are very rare. They are very rare even amongst the liberated souls. Real non-violence means freedom from envy. In this world, everyone is envious of his fellow being, but a perfect Paramahamsa, being completely given up to the service of the Lord, is perfectly non-envious. He loves every being in relation with the Supreme Lord. Real renunciation means perfect dependence on God. Every living being is dependent on someone else because he is so made. Actually, everyone is dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord. But when one forgets his relation with the Lord, he becomes dependent on the conditions of material nature. Renunciation means renouncing one's dependence on the conditions of material nature and thus becoming completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Real independence means complete faith in the mercy of the Lord without dependence on the condition of matter. This Paramahamsa stage is the highest perfectional stage in Bhakti Yoga. the process of devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Translation. Self-controlled persons who are attached to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna can all of a sudden give up the world of material attachment, including the gross body and subtle body, and go away to attain the highest perfection of the renounced order of life by which non-violence and renunciation are consequential. So this is praise of the devotees, but actually this is in relation to the previous verse, which was a glorification of the Lord. So the idea presented here is that the Lord is so wonderful that if one becomes completely attached to the Lord, then he will exhibit the highest stage of existence. So that stage here is called the Paramahamsa stage, which literally means a supreme swan. It's also one of the categories of sannyas. So in Bhagavatam and in other scriptures also, sannyasa is considered to be the highest of the ashramas. And of course it is only available to those who are the highest varna, the brahmanas. But then among the sannyasis we have 4 categories, like Kutichak and Bahudak, and then Parivrajaka, and then finally the Paramahamsa. So the Paramahamsa is the highest stage of sannyas. And in technical terms it means complete detachment from everything. Whereas the other sannyasis may live near a village and have a little cottage there, and then people give them food and things like this, so they're a little bit, they got a little bit of material attachment there because they have to take care of their bodies. Parivrajaka wanders off. Parivrajaka means one who wanders everywhere. So he has no house, he has no shelter at all. He doesn't expect, he doesn't plan for shelter at all. He just wanders around in the world, and this way he survives. And in his perfect stage, it becomes a Paramahamsa. He is so absorbed in the Lord that he doesn't matter whether he moves or he doesn't move. But still he's completely independent of everything in this world. He has no attachment to food, body, shelter, anyone like that. They're completely attached to the Lord. So that's the Paramahamsa stage, very, very high stage. Of course, even without bhakti, it is also there. The sannyas is described in terms of not just bhakti, but other persons as well. But for the devotee, it means one who is completely attached to the Lord and on prema stage, and disregards the material environment and his body completely. So, of course, that is mentioned here in the first part of the verse where it says he completely gives up the body, etc. Deha adishu. He completely rejects the gross body and the subtle body, which means all material existence. Which means not that he doesn't associate with it at all because he has to since he has a body, but he's completely unattached to anything in this material world. Nothing disturbs him. And the reason is given here as anurakta, because he's attached to the Supreme Lord, most attached to the Supreme Lord. He thus gives up all other interests. So, of course, that's a high stage, highest stage, and therefore, as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, it is very rare. So we can't expect, even as devotees, to be at that highest stage immediately, since it is very rare. But we have a process by which we can attain that stage. So that is called Sadhana Bhakti. So through sadhana, we attain bhava, and then we attain prema. So though the stage is rare, we can say this becomes our goal. That is, complete attachment to the Lord and no attachment to anything in this material world. So that is the position for the devotee. That's the goal of the devotee. So this does not particularly mean that everybody has to take sannyas, otherwise their life is a failure. That's not what it means. What it means is everybody should attain prema. And consequently, they're automatically Paramahamsa, completely detached from everything. So the concentration here is not on the renunciation so much as on the attachment to the Lord. Simply to renounce is very difficult, as Prabhupada mentions in the purport. You cannot stop your senses from working. You cannot stop the functions of your body. As long as we're alive, we have to maintain the body and the senses somehow or other. And they're going to get some engagement and be active no matter what. Furthermore, of course, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that not only the body, the gross and the subtle body, but the soul itself by nature is active. We cannot suppress the soul also. So the actions we have with this body and the senses are simply a reflection of the nature of the soul to do some activity. And of course, in the philosophical definition of Atma, Atma is defined as a knower. In other words, it's conscious. It knows things. It's aware of things. It's aware of itself, the Atma. And it's a doer, karta. It's a gyata, a knower. It's a karta, a doer. So the Atma is able to perform activities. And it's a bhokta, an experiencer. The Atma can experience things, so it can feel happiness and distress and whatever. So these are some primary qualities of the Atma, which are never taken away from the Atma. So therefore, very, very difficult to stop even the body and the senses from being active, because the soul by nature is active. Renunciation, therefore, does not mean to stop the senses, as is more or less indicated through jnana and yoga, but rather to engage the senses and the mind. So the process works because the engagement is directed towards the Supreme Lord. Generally, if the engagement is directed towards matter, then we end up with samsara. We end up with material body and karma in this world. So that because the activities create karma and the karma creates bondage and ignorance, the jnanis in the yoga want to get rid of the activity of the body and the senses. So they stop the senses and the mind and the body. So it's a difficult process. It is possible, and therefore these processes are also recommended in the Vedas. But as we see from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually recommends the process of bhakti over other processes. And why? Because it is easier. It is easier because we engage the senses. We don't stop the senses. We don't stop the mind. So the only catch is we can't just go freely engage our senses in anything. We engage them in Supreme Lord. Not only that, we engage them in the Supreme Lord with no desire for our enjoyment. And when that happens, we call it Bhakti Yoga. That's the definition of bhakti. Anukulina Krishna Anusilanam. Cultivating a relationship with Krishna favorably, with affection. And the definition of sadhana bhakti is engage the senses to do that. So that's what we do in sadhana bhakti. We engage the senses to establish a favorable, affectionate relationship with the Supreme Lord. So action is there. The argument against this, of course, can be, well, the senses are material, so how can we accomplish anything spiritual by using material instruments? The same argument could be given against jnana and yoga also, because they are using something. So the jnanis are using knowledge. They're studying scriptures, etc. They're also using their intelligence. They have to analyze using logic, the Brahma Sutras. So they're using material things, intelligence, mind. So we're helpless in the material world if we cannot use our senses and our mind and our body. We have to use them somehow or other for all the processes. But the unique feature of bhakti is this engagement with this devotional attitude directed towards the Supreme Lord, not directed towards matter. And then the senses and the mind and everything else becomes transformed by this process. This is why the process works, even though we're using our senses and our mind, etc. By the process of bhakti, directing those senses towards the Lord with devotion, the senses and the mind become spiritualized. So they don't give a negative effect anymore. And they become helpful for us to manifesting within the jiva bhakti and finally prema. So the ultimate result has got nothing to do with body and senses, and therefore we can give up the body. The ultimate result, which is achieved at the Paramahamsa stage, is prema. So prema is manifested in the jiva. It's not a manifestation in the senses or the mind. It's a manifestation in the jiva. And therefore, at that stage, the Atma can exist separately from the body and the sense. He doesn't need them anymore, and he can readily give them up. And of course, naturally, the person at this stage will have no interest in the senses and the mind and the body, etc. So, in other words, a renunciation is natural for the Paramahamsa, a person who's reached that stage. So, therefore, the goal is not so much renunciation as complete attachment to the Supreme Lord without any material attachments at all. So, by perfecting bhakti, automatically we attain the highest stage of Paramahamsa, complete detachment from everything in this world. So that is described here in the last line, where it describes two qualities of this Paramahamsa stage. Upasama, which means pacification. So there it means complete control of the senses, or complete renunciation of the material world. That's upasama. And the other is non-violence. That we have no anger or hatred or envy for any living entity. So we can manifest, in other words, complete compassion for all living beings. So the upasama, that is the renunciation, is automatically achieved when we get complete attachment to the Lord. If the attachment for the Lord is 100%, there's zero attachment for anything else. Zero attachment for Maya. So Paramahamsa automatically means upasama, renunciation or complete detachment. But that is not the main quality. The main quality is that attachment to the Lord. So because of 100% attachment to the Lord, the jiva develops qualities similar to the Lord. So the Lord has many spiritual qualities. And among those spiritual qualities, one of the most important quality is the compassion or the mercy of the Lord. So the Lord is at all times merciful to the jivas. So by becoming attached to the Lord, then the jiva also manifests compassion or mercy to all jivas. It's a natural result of his bhakti. So the negative result is complete detachment from material things. The positive result is he becomes similar to the Lord and develops all wonderful qualities, including compassion or non-violence. So these are the automatic results of attaining the perfection. These qualities will manifest. So they're not a separate cultivation at all. They're simply the byproducts of complete attachment to the Lord in this Paramahamsa stage. So the devotees are interested in attaining this. We have the other external Paramahamsa, that is the sannyasi stage of life and the highest stage of sannyas. Of course, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, etc. But he doesn't emphasize that you have to take sannyas that particular ashram is not the emphasis in his teachings. And in fact, most of his devotees were not sannyasis, they were grihastas. So the emphasis is upon the bhakti, and then automatically one achieves the highest result of Paramahamsa. Whether he actually formally takes sannyasa or not, if he has that attained the highest stage, then he is the most renounced of all. So the emphasis is upon the internal Paramahamsa stage, or sannyasa. So the word sannyasa can mean, sannyasa means to give up everything. And some means everything. Sannyasa, give up completely. So that's what the sannyasi does in general. He gives up house, he gives up wife, gives up children, gives up wealth and all this, and goes off to the forest and meditates. But that's not the goal of the devotee, because as we know, we don't renounce everything. We use everything in Krishna's service. So in the song of the Avanti Brahmana, there he says that sannyas means not to renounce everything, but to use everything for the Lord. That's the real sannyas. And automatically the other sannyas is achieved by that. So in this way, the emphasis is upon that internal sannyas. So the external sannyas may be helpful. But one has to be careful also that one is qualified to accept that stage of life. So therefore there are all sorts of rules and regulations to make it a very rare occasion. Just as the Paramahamsa stage in Bhakti is rare, Prema is rare, so even in Karma Yoga, sannyas is rare. The Brahmanas are the rarest varna. There's not many Brahmanas in comparison to Sudras and Vaishyas. Most of the 90% of the population is Sudra Vaishya, maybe 8% Kshatriya, 2% Brahmanas. So Brahmins themselves are very rare. And out of those Brahmanas, a few of those will take sannyas. So even that material, we call it material sannyas or whatever, that sannyas in the varnashram system is quite rare in itself. So that means that it's very selective. Not everybody is not open to everyone. So there's an automatic restriction there on who's qualified. And of course, it's not that everybody wants to take sannyas. Most people don't want to. They want to stay in the material world. So even among Brahmanas, we don't find many who are too eager to take that stage. And so it becomes rare automatically in that sense. But one be qualified. So often the procedure is when you've raised your family, when your children are grown up, when they've got their occupation settled, and they have children themselves. And that's, in other words, a person has a grandchild, then that's one qualification for sannyas. When you're very old, in other words, 65 or whatever over, then you're qualified. So that's another restriction. You get older, then automatically there's less possibility that you're going to be attracted to material things. Of course, that's not so in the modern world particularly. We find people in their old age are still attracted. We find that Ajamil, even he was an old man, he was still running around being a criminal and trying to enjoy like anything. So age is not the final qualification, but it's one thing that helps. So that's another restriction they have in sannyas itself, so that less people enter that stage. So if one is qualified for detachment, fine. If one isn't, and one is using that stage as a position or whatever, and one is not qualified, it simply creates a disturbance in the whole system, and the person may fall from his position or whatever. So it creates a problem. So therefore, it's restricted, and there's ways of restricting that, entering into that ashram. Therefore, if there is some that makes it rare even in the material world, what to speak of spiritually. But if a devotee is very renounced, then he can also enter that stage. So we see Lord Chaitanya entered that stage. He had a few associates, like 10 sannyasis around him in Puri, like Paramananda Puri, etc. They were also sannyasis. But later on in the Sampradaya, we'll see that sannyas was not really that much emphasized, and the varna sannyas was not, we don't see any really people. After that generation of Lord Chaitanya and his associates and Prabodhananda Saraswati, after that we don't see. So it was mainly grastas that were carrying on the movement after that point for hundreds and hundreds of years. But there was something similar to that. So that's what the Babaji is. He's the Vaishnava equivalent of the sannyasi without any of the accoutrements of the sannyasi, no danda, no red cloth, nothing. No markings at all. He's beyond the varnashram system. That's also considered like a paramahamsa stage. But the warning is to get to that stage, that's the highest part of sannyas, so therefore you have to be very, very qualified. So therefore, there was always warnings given by persons like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. You could not enter that stage unless you're very highly qualified by bhakti and detachment. So again, there was some restriction. Unfortunately, we find that, like all systems, people tend to break the rules. So there were people who became Babajis for the wrong reasons again. Just like they may take sannyas for the wrong reason, they would take Babaji for the wrong reasons, and then they would not be really detached, and they would set up ashrams and attract money and do all this sort of thing also. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur would criticize all of this, and therefore they were not so favorable towards those persons. But we see that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur introduced into his organization sannyas again, which I said was not really there. They had the Babaji equivalent, but then they didn't have sannyas as such. But as a part of his preaching effort, therefore, he introduced the sannyas ashram in the Gaudiya Sampradaya for some select people again. So this is how it enters into our system through the innovations of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And again, there has to be qualification. So therefore we have a sannyasa ministry, and they have all sorts of rules and regulations, and you have to be over a certain age, otherwise you have to wait 10 years or something. And if you're a little older, you wait 5 years and whatever there, and you get tested every year, and you have to take examinations and whatever, and take courses or whatever. So there's some refinement process to see that if they take sannyas, they're actually qualified, and they don't have material desires, or much less, and they're not going to create a disturbance. So again, there's some restriction there for that. And the idea is that it's kind of a rare stage. Sannyas, and especially Paramahamsa, is very rare, either in the Varnashram system or even within the Vaishnavas. So, but that's the goal, ultimately, complete dedication to the Lord and complete renunciation of the material world. But of the two, we emphasize the dedication to the Lord, and then the externals don't matter so much. Okay, any question?
The development of qualities that resemble Krishna's qualities, like compassion.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see it in people that don't practice anything, they develop similar qualities than the Lord. Does that come from the jiva, or is that the train? Or is it the
well, we have similar qualities in the material world called sattvic qualities. Sense control, mind control, faith in scripture, humility, so many good qualities, say, in the material world, which are basically sattvic qualities. So these are actually material qualities coming out of sattva. So in the Varnashram system, they encourage these sattvic qualities. So even a Sudra has to have some good qualities. So he's not completely tamas, he got some good qualities, so like that. So, and when we get to sattva, then you should manifest all these good qualities nicely. And then the other qualities like anger and greed, which belong to passion and ignorance, should be much less. So those qualities are manifested, the good qualities in the material world are manifested through the gunas. The gunas can manifest, of course, by past practice and past lifetimes, etc. If you were a Brahmana in your past lifetime and you practice nicely, then you get born as a Brahmana again and you have sattvic qualities or whatever. But it's also possible to induce qualities in this life. This is the whole opportunity for the human being. Even though he's born on one level, he can change a little bit more by association. So if we associate with the lower class, then we become low class. If we associate with higher class people, we develop those good qualities. So even if we were born into a certain a group of qualities, set of qualities, still by choice of association or accidental association, then we can improve ourselves. So there's possibility, modification of what we're born with in this lifetime by either accidental or intelligent choice of association and whatever. So now that we can cultivate those qualities to some degree, the material qualities. Yeah? But there's a difference between the sattvic quality and the devotional quality. Well, the devotional quality is not based on a cultivation of material gunas, it's based upon a relationship with Krishna. And the sattvas, the honesty or the compassion, is related to Krishna. It's not related to material things, which sattva qualities are in relation to.
Did you make a statement that basically the qualities developed through the gunas is totally useless if there is no connection to the Supreme Lord?
Yeah. Well, of course, Krishna says of the gunas, sattva is the best. Because if you get to sattva gun, then the qualities there are favorable for spiritual life in general. Sense control, faith in scripture, understanding they're not the body or the Atma. So these are the natural results of sattva gun. Those qualities are good, but they're actually sattvic qualities. They arise through sattva guna. But they're favorable. It doesn't produce bhakti, but they're favorable for bhakti. It's better than having tamasic and rajasic qualities and great attachment to the material world. So the sattvic qualities are favorable. They're not bhakti itself. They don't produce bhakti, but they're favorable for it. So in that sense, they're okay. We don't condemn them. We're not trying. In other words, we're not saying be a devotee and cultivate tamasic qualities. We can't say that.
Without condemning, at the same time, you can assess that it's not necessarily a quality of bhakti.
No, it's not a quality of bhakti. But there may be a confusion because the devotee has all humility, respect for living entities, non-violence, trinada visanijana, etc. These are intrinsic to establishing a relationship to the Lord also. But those are in relation to the Lord. Those qualities develop, not in relation to gunas. So therefore, they may look the same, but they're actually different.
So if someone looks from let's say, the external point of view, and he's looking at two sets of qualities, one from bhakti, one from...
Oh, this person's better because he's so nice and got all the sattvic qualities. This devotee's got the bad qualities. Yeah, we may have wrong... So we may make judgments on people according to qualities, and then we'll say this person has good qualities, they're not even a devotee, and that person's a devotee, but he has some bad qualities, so we'll say the other person's better. Yeah? But actually, no, because if the person's chosen bhakti and he's sincere, even if he manifests bad qualities, eventually those qualities will disappear, and he'll develop more good qualities in relation to the Lord than that other person who has good qualities in the material world.
I guess I want to ask you, what's how do you distinguish if one is guna quality, the other one is bhakti quality? The sincerity is the one that distinguishes? Probably,
yeah, the sincere devotion of the person, yeah. Of course, we can have people that pretend to be devotees and practice, and they may manifest what pretend to be good qualities, but eventually the real thing will manifest, the real qualities will manifest also, eventually.
Just in relation to sannyas, we saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas before preaching, and why did the Vaishnavas avoid that form of sannyas for so long? Was it because...
The Gaudiyas?
Yeah, was it mainly because the Sankhas were the main sannyasas, wouldn't want to be associated with them?
Not particularly that, but he didn't really stress that as the main factor. The main chant is chant the holy name, and most of the people were grihastas, they chant the holy name. Not that you have to take sannyas to chant or anything, so like that. But then if they got detached, then the other thing is instead of sannyas, which is part of the varnashram system, they would go beyond that, and then they took Babaji. So that became the equivalent within that. We see that Lord Chaitanya says, oh, sannyasa is external, this and that, whatever. So instead of that sannyas, therefore, the Gaudiyas became Babajis, renounced without the cloth and the symbols of varnashram at all.
It seems like the sannyasa order thought it was quite a powerful tool for preaching. So it was like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took it up himself for that purpose.
Yeah.
So is there any reason, I mean, you
Why the others didn't also take it up for preaching or whatever?
yeah, because it socially was such a...
Yeah. Well, the other point is, as I said, rare. So we can't expect everybody to take sannyas and be a preacher and take sannyas. So it's possible they could look around and do that, but then most of the people of Lord Chaitanya's followers, they were all grihastas. So and they didn't aspire actually to even take sannyas. They're just because he didn't really emphasize that as part of the bhakti process. Yeah? And of course he says whether you're a sannyasi or a grihasta, grihetake vanetak, or whether you're in the house or whether you're in the forest, you simply chant the holy name. So they more or less took it easy, I could say, in that sense. And rather, instead of concentrating on externals, they could be advanced internally. So they didn't take formal sannyas in the varna ashram system, but internally they could be very, very advanced. And so it may be very difficult to tell what they were because they were acting as grihastas, but internally they were very, very advanced, like Pundarik Vidyanidhi or someone like that.
The statement that sannyas is not allowed in Kali Yuga, does that then refer to that varnashram sannyas without bhakti, and or does it refer? Obviously, our Acharyas established it, so do they disregard that?
Well, interestingly enough, we see that even the impersonalists have their sannyasi. Shankaracharya was a sannyasi also in Kali Yuga, and then the other sampradayas like Madhva has sannyas, and Ramanuja Sampradaya also has sannyas. He took sannyas also. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains when it says sannyas is forbidden in Kali Yuga, he says that's karma sannyasa, the sannyas where you give up all activities. That is forbidden in Kali Yuga. So where you run off to the forest and don't do anything at all. So if you can engage yourself nicely in devotional service, that type of sannyas, okay. That was his explanation. Others, I don't know what they say in Madhva Sampradaya or Ramanuja Sampradaya, but they have their reasons for sannyas also. But I think in those cases also it was like the case of Lord Chaitanya, that it was good for preaching. And since Shankaracharya took sannyas, therefore, in order to establish their own philosophy, they also took sannyas and they preached from that level. And of course, by nature, they were very detached from household life anyway. They weren't attached to it.
You mentioned how a devotee should not, but doesn't need to cultivate any qualities, because everything comes with bhakti. By practicing bhakti, you acquire all the good qualities, isn't it? You mentioned that. But sometimes that can lead to devotees not making any effort. And also, when I read, for example, Bhadashamrita, or even in the 11th canto, Krishna tells to Uddhava that actually, like you mentioned before, that in order to reach God, you need to be in sattva gun and beyond sattva gun even. And he mentions how we need to practice qualities in sattva gun in order to get to that stage. Like, for example, if a person is not in sattva gun, by practicing things that they are in sattva gun, he will become sattva. So there is a separate effort, it looks like.
Well, we have qualities in bhakti, but if you look in Nectar Devotion, the Rupa Goswami says, after he goes through the angas of bhakti, like hearing and chanting and whatever like that, then he says, Varnashram is not an anga of bhakti. Cultivation of good qualities is not an anga of bhakti. And jnana and vairagya are not angas of bhakti. So in other words, the things which create bhakti or manifest bhakti, like hearing and chanting, those are the activities we do. Other things that may be favorable, so we incorporate them. So we have in Nectar of Instruction, we have Utsaha and Nishcha, and what we call it, Dhairya, patience, etc., as favorable qualities for bhakti. And obviously controlling the senses, etc. These are favorable. Other things are unfavorable. So we have things which are favorable to bhakti. And we, it's not that we cultivate those things, but we try to avoid at least the negative aspects of these things, which would be the opposite. That is, lack of sense control, lack of patience, etc., lack of faith, etc. So once we develop faith, faith itself has within it some of these positive qualities, like humility and a taste for the Lord and this conviction. They're all including within faith itself, which is a qualification for bhakti. And as we do bhakti, then they get stronger and stronger. And so we do things favorable for bhakti, those things which help us with the bhakti, but we don't make them as the major cultivation. We observe them as secondary elements along with the major cultivation. And we avoid the opposites of those things. So we avoid what's unfavorable, and we practice what is favorable along with our main angas of bhakti. Okay, Hare Krishna.